Hello and welcome to Sassy as Fuck. I'm John McGreevy, a positioning copywriter. I'm flying solo this week as Alex isn't feeling well. This week, our guest is founder and CEO of DN Simple, Anthony Eden. How's it going, Anthony?
Very well, thank you, and thanks for having me on.
That's no problem. I immediately, by the way, just to get out of the way, in the UK, the way you spell your name is pronounced Anthony, but I imagine for you it's Anthony. And I think I managed to get it right on the intro and then immediately get it wrong. So I apologise for that.
You can say it whatever way you want. It's all good. I'm used to it. No problem.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. It was impressive how quickly my head just abandoned it straight away. I literally had the TH in bold for my intro, and then I didn't for the next bit. And so immediately my brain just went, well, it's Anthony then, because I didn't do that. So, yeah, solid. This is how my professionalism goes when Alex isn't here. Just immediately goes up.
Oh, this could be great. It's gonna be chaos. Let's do this.
Right, so my first question for you, obviously this is a very important, very serious SaaS podcast. So my first one is, I was in your neck of the woods about 30 years ago on a family holiday. What is up with all the armadillos?
And are you talking about it in Florida?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I don't know what it is with armadillos and Florida and wanting to walk across roads constantly. It's just a thing. I don't know why we have them down there. They seem to be happy. Maybe they like the heat. I don't know.
There was just, I went to Cape Canaveral with my family. Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, yep.
Did it change names at one point? I don't know. But yeah.
They call it Kennedy Space Center. They call it Cape Canaveral. They call it all kinds of things.
That's why my head just panicked and went, I'm sure that's a different name for it. But yeah, I went there and on this bus, and I don't remember anything about going to Cape Canaveral or the Space Center or anything. But the bus ride out there was just armadillos everywhere, and I was very excited at the time. But turns out I've since Googled it, and turns out they're a massive pest.
They are a pain. They dig up holes everywhere, just constantly. So, I mean, maybe there's some. I've heard stories that they're developing an armadillo army out there at the Cape. That's one of their secrets. It's not really for launching rockets. It's actually for the armadillo army. So it could be that. Could be if there's any truth to that rumor.
I think it makes sense. I think that that they come pre-armored, so they've already got that going for them. There's enough of them, and it kind of makes sense. And because the Space Center becomes the perfect place to deploy them. So
exactly,
I think that rumor is 100% true. And
this is the internet, right? We should be able to spread any rumor and make it true if we say it often enough. So let's go for it.
Exactly, and these clips go out on TikTok, so that's the perfect place to go and spread these. And so I think we're good. I think we could be pioneers in spreading pretty, in the grand scheme of things, pretty harmless misinformation.
Unless it's actually true, in which case we may have saved a lot of people.
Or we both get knocked off and never heard from again.
This is possible too.
One or the other. So you started DN Simple 15 years ago, and
Correct.
Before that you worked mostly as a CTO and developer.
Correct.
Across different companies. What was the thing that made you take that step from CTO, developer, being that side of the business to being, I'm gonna start my own company, I'm gonna be a founder now?
That's a great question. So at the time I was wrapping up working at a startup out in Hawaii that I had done twice. So it wasn't my startup, but I had been CTO twice at the same startup. The first time we had hit a point where the founder, and who was the CEO, had something really tragic happen in his life, and he just needed to take a break from it. So that ended abruptly, I think in around 2000 and I want to say 5 or 6. And then after he recovered from that, I went back out and we tried it one more time in 2008, 2009, all the way up to 2010. And it was okay, but we kind of missed the boat in terms of where the internet was going. We were on the cusp of understanding that we had essentially a SaaS in the very early days of SaaS, but we were still trying to follow the give it away for free and then charge advertising model, and it just wasn't working. We would have had to have a lot more capital, and raising capital was difficult. So as that was wrapping down, I looked at what I had done over the last 17 years of my career prior to that, and I said, okay, I've watched different people build businesses, succeed, fail, do all kinds of things in it, and I think I understand enough now to know some of the pitfalls that come with running a technology business. And so I'm going to do this the way I want to do it. I had a very specific goal in mind, which was to build a business where I could travel and live my life the way I wanted to. Now, a lot of people call that disparagingly a lifestyle business, but it really was a business that was designed to let me do that. And it was the right moment to give it a shot. And at the time I was using GoDaddy, and I said, what am I doing? This experience is horrible. I want to register a domain, and every time I do, they're trying to sell me 18 different things, and the DNS experience was terrible. And I was like, okay, I've been in this industry long enough. I know this space. I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. And that was the start in April of 2010, where I wrote the first lines of code. And it was just the DNS part first. So the idea was just going to do the authoritative DNS part. And that kind of kicked off the journey.
I think that's the kind of the story of most genuinely good businesses, is ones where you had a problem to solve, and so you solved it. And then, because then when you've got a genuine solution that you know works for you, you know there's going to be other people in the same boat, the same problems to solve, that will get on board. And actually it's actually built, because some people build a company based on, I wonder what people would buy, but that's not how it works.
It's hard to build a successful company off of an idea that's not based around a known existing problem that people want to say, take my money. There are some cases, and when they happen, of course, the media, loves it, because it's always that story of like, they had a brilliant idea and then they built it and it was amazing. They're leaving out, the years and years of toiling away and all the failed ideas and all of the pivots that had to happen along the way. But that's often the case, that if you don't start from a real problem, you end up with something that nobody really wants. And in this case, DNS has been around for a long time now. I've been in the business since 1999, so I knew that there was still a lot of things that were not fun and not useful for developers. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna make my mark here and try to do this.
I think it's not necessarily the sexiest area to start a business, but it's such a necessary part. Every website, it has to have DNS and has to have these things in place. So it's a very necessary part, and it's something that people don't often understand. And so it makes sense, even if it's not necessarily the flavor of the month. It's not going to be, wearable AI and all that kind of things.
I'd love to. That part of me wishes at times that I was doing something that was more interesting, that was newsworthy for the hacker news and the tech crunches of the world, but that's just not the case. The only time we ever show up on those things is when something goes terribly wrong. And fortunately, that hasn't happened in a long time. So we just never show up on them.
I think take that. I think as long as the business is going well enough, I don't think you need that. You don't need to make the news, because those same companies that make the news for their brilliant idea at the start are the same ones that make the news a year later for the controversy or the failure or the flop or any of that.
Yeah, I'm not really bothered that much by it. Take my word for it.
Good. Yeah, I don't think you should be. So what's the main difference you've experienced then? I know it's been a while now, but between the role of CTO and the role of a founder in a tech company, because I feel like people could assume they're quite similar, but I imagine a lot of surprises come out the woodwork when you're a founder.
Absolutely. In a lot of ways, being a CTO was a lot easier for me, because I love technology and I loved getting deep into sort of the thorny problems. I'm not going to say I was a very good software developer, but I developed a lot of software. And so I'd seen a lot of different types of problems in that space, and I got a lot of experience doing that. As a CEO, what I realized is I didn't have, and still many times don't have, the background and knowledge to accomplish these things. So it's imperative that I find people around me who can help, who can guide me, and ultimately who can do a better job at certain pieces of it. When I first started DN Simple, I did all the accounting, I did all of the bookkeeping, I did did pretty much everything. The hiring, the financing, just everything. And over the years, I've slowly tried to take those things off my plate. And also, of course, I had to take off the technology side off my plate, which only happened really to its final completion a few years back. Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot for one person to have in their brain. Because I guess that with CTO, I think a lot of CTOs do struggle to. I used to be a software tester, so I worked in kind of development side for like 14 years. And there are CTOs that want to be more hands-on, and you kind of can be if the business is small enough.
Yeah.
But with a founder, as soon as you have people to do those jobs, it's going to be impossible to really actually kind of get involved and stay on that side of it. But at the same time, it's probably quite hard to let go of it as well.
It is. It was very hard to let go of the technology side of things because again, it was something I enjoyed and I wanted to keep doing it. But I finally reached the point where I said, me being involved in the technology is not going to help move this company forward, because we understand the technology problems that we face. We understand that fairly deeply. And although new problems will surface, the real interesting stuff is, how do we do the parts of the business that have nothing to do with that? How do we build a marketing funnel that actually gets people in the front door and through and into DN Simple? How do we build a sales team, which is something we recently started doing, that are going after larger contracts, whether those are inbound or ones that we're going out to find? All of these things need attention, and I think at a small business, the job of the CEO is to take on a lot of those things until they find the right person to take that over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's a really good point, actually, you raised then, is that obviously a CTO, sales and marketing's irrelevant, right? That salespeople, when you're a CTO, are the people who make promises you've got to deliver, and that's kind of really the end of it. Whereas you've had to go from not worry about that to all of a sudden you really have to worry about it. And I was kind of looking up your story on there, and technical SaaS is a tricky area to position and grow, because it's like you say, it's not particularly sexy. You're not going to talk about someone's beliefs and dreams and hopes for DNS, but you need to do well. But I saw that you managed to get 1,000 customers in the first 4 months. How did you manage to go from effectively brand new business to 1,000 customers in just 4 months?
So I think there were a couple different components. One was I had an audience already. So at the time, I had been writing a lot of web applications and a lot of open source software, all in the Ruby space. And so I had been going out to conferences and speaking at Ruby events for several years before, talking about all kinds of different concepts and ways to use Ruby and Rails and everything around the Ruby ecosystem. And so I had built up a decent sized following of folks who were also developers. And I knew I wanted to position DN Simple as a DNS provider for engineers and for developers. And so I was able to do things, for example, like going to RubyConf and giving a 5-minute lightning talk about how I could register a domain name using the command line interface with a little CLI that I wrote in Ruby. And I think that, combined with, frankly, luck and being in the right place at the right time, where the incumbents in the space were kind of getting a little long in the tooth. They weren't really innovating anymore. Things had kind of stagnated for quite a while. And so there was an opportunity for new companies to come around. And so DN Simple was born around that time. Several different registrars that have since gone on and become acquired or merged with other companies got created then. Cloudflare launched just around that time as well. I think they started in 2009. So
yeah, okay.
So it was timing plus an audience, and then of course a little bit of it is just the drive. I was constantly, when I wasn't working, so I was also working a full-time job, and I was doing that as a side gig. And when I wasn't working on the full-time job, I was spending time on the side gig. Like, okay, what can I do next? What can I build that will be solving problems that folks like me have with this, whether that's API clients or other tools or new elements, adding the registrar, which initially wasn't there, and it was only in October of 2010 where I started building that out. So it just was pushing through these different ideas. I think led to the initial growth.
Yeah, and I guess the benefit of having those 1,000 users at the start means that you have people to ask for things, to ask for features, and to do that. And so it means that you don't have, a lot of startups go through a few years of going, we're guessing what the customers want, whereas you have customers, it makes it a bit easier to the product to grow in the right direction.
Absolutely, yeah. I relied heavily on the people that I knew initially who had signed up, and was able to just reach out to them like, hey, what do you think about this? Or on Twitter, I'd be like, hey, what do you all want me to build the registrar? Because that was actually the origin of it. I was like, do you like your registrar, and would you like me to add that to DN Simple? And I got a lot of yes, add it. I think I got 100 and something responses, and pretty much everybody from my audience at least was like, yeah, it's terrible. Please do something about it.
Yeah, nice. So immediately kind of get that validation and you're doing it rather than kind of realizing 2 years later, no one cares.
Yeah, and we were charging money from day one. That was part of as I mentioned, I wanted a business that I could live my life. And I knew that in order to do that, I needed to have a cash flow positive, profitable business. And so from day one, I said, I'm going to have at least some sort of a subscription fee on there. I'm offering this service. I'm putting the work into it. It's operationally requires to run 24/7, 365. I feel like I should get paid for it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it was easy to ensure that the billing aspect was in there from the very, very early days. And I think at least for a long time, a lot of startups were hesitant to put billing. They're like, no, I'm going to give it to free until we determine that the market is ready for it or what have you. And that wasn't something I was willing to do.
Well, and also because you started off as a side hustle, you didn't have that same, I guess, if you've packed up your whole life and just focused entirely on that, it becomes a bit more pressure. But the fact that you bet on yourself and decided to go, no, I'm working, I'll charge for it, and it paid off is a good lesson to probably a lot of people who do kind of, that idea that the money will come later. It doesn't have to.
It's great validation too. If somebody's willing to pay you, that is the best kind of validation that you can get, that at least there's something solid there. And then if they're willing to keep paying you, it means you've also combined that with something that is giving repeat value and ongoing value to folks as opposed to one-time value. And it means you have something of at least fair quality that people are saying, okay, this is pretty good, I'm going to stick around.
Yeah. So how long did it take from side hustle to, okay, I can quit my job now?
So I didn't take a full-time position until I think the second or third year of the business. So the first person we hired was actually the person who's now the CTO, which is Simone Carletti. I acquired his business for a little bit of money, plus brought him in full-time, and he was actually our first hire. And so that was in 2012. And then my co-founder, who's my brother, he became the second hire, and then I became the third hire. So it took a few years. I think it takes about 3 years usually when you're bootstrapping something, even if it has a fairly steady growth rate or what have you, that you're going to want to take on a full-time. Now, I started taking a little bit of money off earlier in that, but I wasn't really full-time in it until then.
I like that being the founder, you were still the third employee.
I know, right? I throughout, for much of the early years, I underpaid myself drastically, and that's actually a detriment. That's the other thing. Like, one of the things I learned later on is it's okay to actually get paid a living wage as a founder if you have a successful business.
Yeah, it doesn't. I understand when there's not the money coming in, but when the money is coming in, you should probably be rewarded for the work you're doing.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not. It's a weird kind of charity where you're just giving away. I guess
indeed.
Just the employees at that point.
Well, that and reinvesting, like said, I'm going to keep it. I want to reinvest, which it is good. There's nothing wrong with that, but not at the expense of your own sanity. You need to be able to live a healthy life.
Yeah, because that impacts your mental health, it impacts your physical health, it impacts
Right.
everything. If you're working that hard and you have the stress of money at the same time, that's
Indeed.
not worth it. So how, obviously, that first blitz to 1,000 customers is, that's, relatively unheard of, really, in the large grand things. But how have you changed and evolved your approach to, customer acquisition, lead generation? How did finding new customers change after that initial year?
Well, so obviously, if my audience is only a certain size, right? So once you exhaust your audience, then you rely on, especially in the early days, a lot of referrals. And so we did that. We built in some referral programs that helped us grow. We also took advantage over the first few years of competitor foibles and mistakes. And I didn't do much, but at least I came out and said, hey, your money talks. If you don't like who you're with because they do something silly or stupid or evil, walk. Like, take your money and go somewhere else. And so that helped us grow along the way. At some point, even though that hits a limit. So you hit this kind of this curve that is essentially flattens out. And so we've developed, we use a lot of content as an important way of getting folks in. So we unintentionally started doing SEO, and because that was just, it was like, we wanted to write this stuff. We wanted to make it easy to use. It turns out it was a good way to bring people in. We've done a lot of conferences over the years. So we would sponsor conferences. We would show up at conferences. I guerrilla marketed at conferences. So in the early days before we could afford sponsorship, I would go to conferences with candy or something, and I'd walk around to the booths and I'd pitch the sponsors at the conferences about D and Simple. So we got some customers that way too. So it was just,
nice.
It was all kinds of little guerrilla hacks and things, like guerrilla marketing type things. And we've kind of kept to that throughout the years, trying different things. Lately, we've been doing video, I've been doing podcasts, just trying lots of different things, seeing what works and what works and is also enjoyable and is also well aligned with the ethics of D and Simple, because I have a fairly strong sort of ethical guidelines about how I treat people and how I treat the business and how I treat our customers. And I try to stick to those. And so I try to find the things that kind of support those beliefs as well.
So what are those beliefs then? What are the things that you try and kind of keep tight to as like the business grows and evolves?
So I think one, for example, is we have pretty much stayed away from cold emailing, because I don't believe that. I believe my email inbox is somewhat precious to me, if you will. I want a very low signal to noise ratio, and so I will go out and say on podcasts, don't email me. I'll give you my email address, but don't pitch me something. It's okay if you want to ask questions, if you're trying to do something and I can genuinely help you, but don't pitch me your service. Full stop.
Yeah.
And if I get an email from you that's not going to that doesn't have an unsubscribe link on it, you're going to spam, right? So, but in order for me to say that, I also have to tell our team, our sales folks, for example, you can't do that. It's not an option. And of course, that takes one type of sales channel off the table. So then we have to get creative and find other ways to do it. The other part is I believe strongly, if you make a commitment, you keep a commitment, right? If I make a commitment to somebody to show up, to do something for them, then I strive really hard to keep that commitment. And so that's another thing that I look for, ways where I can make commitments that I can actually keep. It's also, I think, part of the reason why we've mostly stayed bootstrapped, why we haven't raised a bunch of money, is because I wouldn't trust that I'd be able to use it wisely myself. So it means I'd have to give up control of the company, because really somebody else could probably do it better. And I just haven't been to the point where it's like, for this business, it doesn't make any sense. So these are just a few examples of it.
No, I think it's good that integrity is something that's worth holding on to and worth doing. And I think some of that comes down to the old adage of, treat people as you want to be treated. If you don't like getting cold emails, don't send them. If you don't like people turning up late, don't turn up late. Things like that are it's quite straightforward, but I think it's worth clinging on to. I mean, obviously there's a whole history of companies that say one thing and do another, and so it's good to see people, actually doing what they talk about.
I'm trying really hard, and we try really hard to do that both inside and outside the business. So, I mean, another example is we've obviously generative AI is a huge topic right now. And if you look at the startup space, the companies that are coming out now, as well as existing companies, pretty much everybody's AI. Last year I went to the Amazon event, their big reInvent thing in Vegas, which, by the way, was way too huge. But I went to that for the first time, and I said, okay, what am I going to see? Literally every company there is an AI company. There's companies like that have nothing to do with AI, but they're an AI company. And so our approach has been, well, we really care about our customers and their data. So let's first make sure we can do things in a safe fashion before we go making any claims, before we go putting anybody's information in there. So we've been taking a slower approach to it. But I mean, that's a decision that in some ways puts us slightly behind the game if there is something that is truly going to change how our business works.
I potentially, but also so I'm as a copywriter, I focus on positioning. And something I talk to clients about is that largely with B2B SaaS, it isn't about, the old benefits above features. A lot of time it comes down to features, price, and service. And I think with AI, often people see it as AI being a feature advantage. But if everyone claims to have that and give you that advantage, it no longer is an advantage. It's no longer a selling point for a company. Whereas focusing on service, for example, will make you then stand out. It will make you do it. So I feel like everyone going and calling themselves AI can be an advantage for the companies that don't and that focus on other things. But I think it's just a time will tell situation. But I don't think it's something to particularly... People have panicked into adding AI to their product, and I don't think it's going to pay off in the long run for a lot of them.
Yep, for some it will. I mean, if you do it right and you do it in a way where it truly changes the experience that people have and makes it a lot better, then my guess is it'll work out very well for some folks. I've seen some pretty amazing things coming out. I've also seen a lot of trash.
Yeah.
So, like you said, time will tell what will happen.
Yeah. But I think there's going to be, like you say, a small number of winners and a lot of people who go, we spent quite a lot of money talking about AI that we probably could have spent on other things.
Yeah. I think, for example, the biggest mistake is saying, we're going to bet on AI so that we can have fewer people. And I was like, no, you talked about service. Service comes from people who care.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a lot of them, but there have to be people that care. And so I think it comes back again to the ethics. If you really care about your customers, then you have to have people on board who understand that that's important and they need to live that and they need to actually take care of the customers.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you're not somebody who wants to be fobbed off by an AI chatbot, then it's not worth doing that in your own business.
Yep, exactly.
So what have been the biggest challenges? You talk about how you've kind of brought people in. What have been the biggest challenges and lessons from the marketing side, but also just the running a business side of being a founder since you started?
So one of the biggest challenges I think in any business is going to be figuring out how to stand out from the crowd. Again, luck played a big part into the early days of DN Simple's success, and the fact that we were at a point in the world of DNS domains where change was going to be a good thing. Fast forward 5 years, Amazon enters, and then Microsoft enters, Google enters. So you have major players who essentially have unlimited funds if they really want to.
Yeah.
Come in and start adding DNS and domains to their offering. And when you're a small company and you're already facing the competition from medium-sized players and from legacy players, and all of a sudden now you also have the biggest tech giants in the world coming into the space, it's easy to go, well, I'm out.
Yeah.
There's no way that we could do this. So figuring out how to carve out a niche that actually is sustainable and that will continue to have the opportunity to grow and make improvements I think was a big challenge for us, and still remains so to this day, because there's always going to be new attacks, new things that come, new companies that will, or existing companies that will join into the space, that we have to deal with that ever-changing environment. And so when you're marketing, that's like you're having to come up with a message that is going to reach that specific audience that you're really going after. And then when you reach that audience, you're going to have to figure out how you can keep your message enough to keep that audience, but broaden it as well to keep growing your audiences. And that's just an ongoing challenge. You have to basically iterate on that all the time.
Yeah, and you have to listen to what they're saying, listen to what's happening, keep an eye on everything. And yeah, I can't imagine the feeling of getting a news notification when you in something like DN Simple and go like, oh, Google's now doing this. You're like, fucking stop.
Yeah.
I think I'd struggle not to ruin my week, if not longer.
That's the good news is that for every one of those where they've done something and says we're entering into this, Google has a tendency also to exit in beautiful ways. So, for example, when they said we're shutting down Google domains and we basically sold everything to Squarespace, I kind of chuckled a little inside because I know the kind of people that use Google domains and they don't want to use Squarespace. And so it's like I laughed quite a bit about it, and then of course tried to work on some messaging to encourage some of those folks to come to us.
Yeah, Yeah, because straight since then I've been just transferring everything over to Porkbun, like from my own and stuff. So I was like, got the email being like, "Oh, we sold Squarespace." I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna not do that. Thank
So
you.
every time somebody exits, I also think of that. Well, they entered, but then they exit, right, in some way. So
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good way of looking at it. Is that it's not, often the luxury they have is they can try something, and then easily just can it and move on from that. Whereas most people can't do that, and so they do. So you're right. That's a good way of looking at it. That it's not just because someone like that decides to do it doesn't mean they're actually going to keep doing it or really invest in doing it well.
yeah, yeah, or completely take over the market, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
There's always I think there's a decent amount of space for a lot of variety of companies in all kinds of different markets, and so we have our space, and we continue to focus on that, and Google and Amazon and Microsoft are going to focus on their space, and everybody's kind of got their own little areas, and so we'll just keep doing that. And often, at least in the DNS world, integrating with each other is actually a really an important and valuable part of this, because you have to in DNS interoperability is critical for the internet actually to function properly. And so we've taken that and kind of expanded on that a little bit and done integrations that they can't do, because they can't integrate down. Like, that's the problem with being the biggest player. You can really only integrate with somebody that's your peer or bigger than you in order to get value out of it. When you're a small player, you can integrate with lots of different players, both small and large, and your customers get value out of that, and you as a business get value out of it. So it's a strategic advantage in some ways to be small enough to have a larger pool of let's say partners that you can integrate with.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good way of looking at it. So, this is a big old question. If you could go back and start from scratch, starting again back in 2010, what would you have done different?
Honestly, I don't think I would have changed very much from the early days. I was really happy with sort of the inception of how things went down. I maybe would have charged more. I was really afraid to. So I said I took money, but I was really afraid to take anything more than a pittance.
Yeah.
Right. So for many years, wow, it was a great. Like, we were way undercharging people for lots of things, and I think even today, some folks will look at our pricing and say, "Oh, well, now not so much because we've been able to adjust to the market a little bit more." But a couple years back, our pricing was kind of a bundled pricing. So you had 5 zones included in a plan. And they would look at that and go, well, I only have 1 zone, so I don't really see the value there. But we needed to do that in order to get the cash flow going and to keep that, to be competitive and keep the business alive. And then, of course, as the market dictates and the big players sort of set what we're able to charge, what the world is able to charge for this and get away with it, we've had to adjust to that as well, and then find other ways to bring value to customers where it's not on the existence of a zone or DNS query volume, those types of things, which are kind of commoditized by the big players. And instead, we have to look at other areas where we can say, okay, here's where we can bring value that they can't, and therefore we can charge a premium for that.
Yeah, nice. I think charging more is a good thing to look back on and go, "The cool, that's a good thing." That's, there's worse lessons to learn than we could have made more money.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, my brother left the company in 2014, and it would be very easy for me to say, "Oh, I shouldn't have started it with him," because it was not exactly the greatest separation. But I don't think that's the case. I think that it was the right thing to do at the time, and I think honestly, dealing with that, the separation and the fallout from all of that, made the company better in the long run. So had he not been there, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to make the company better in the long run. I don't know.
That's a positive way of looking at it. Yeah, it's easy. I think it's easy to look at things like that and go, "Well, I'd rather that didn't happen, therefore I wish it didn't." But at the same time, if you can look at it and go, "We learned lessons from it," cool.
And all of the things that happened, good and bad, have all been very helpful for learning how to run a business better. And I wish I could say that if I did another business, that I wouldn't make any of those mistakes. I'd probably make some of them again and probably pick some new ones to make,
Yeah, you got to keep it interesting.
It's unintentional. It's just, we're human, right? So we just make mistakes. That's the way it is.
Yeah, we can't stop that. You got to lead into it, and just
Yeah,
as long as you learn from them and don't just do them over and over again, then I think you're good.
exactly.
Right now, who's Trusty, and is the rumor true that he took out the dinosaurs?
So there's Trusty sitting back there.
Oh yeah,
So Trusty is an authoritative name server, and I don't believe that he took out the dinosaurs. I think that rumor is not well founded, given how late in the history of the Earth DNS was created. I don't think Trusty did that. I think that's just a rumor, probably spread by Tiny P. By the way, Tiny P is the resolver. He has a tendency to spread untrue things, so he probably was the one that started that rumor. I wonder if I have him here. I don't. Oh yes, I do. He's here as well. You can't really see him.
oh nice, yeah, okay.
So he's the one. Like this is my guy right here. He's got the cop glasses. You know, he's the one that's authoritative. This one's just a troublemaker. So.
Yeah, because I saw those comics. So it looks like looking at, because I found like a blog of yours past stuff. It seems like so the comics are something you've done for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that something that have you made all of those yourself?
No, I mean, when you say yourself, I didn't make. I have not enough creativity to do that. We have a team member who is kind of our head of design who does that. He's started doing webcomics with how DNS.works, and then he did how HTTPS.works a few years later. He keeps adding new characters to it, and in fact, he just launched his third one that he did, which is how DNSSEC.works, which explains DNSSEC, which is actually a pretty complicated topic to explain.
Yeah,
It's kind of a passion project of his, but it's great because in some ways it helped create a lot of the characters that we use today to keep the Simple a little fun and to keep it a little irreverent.
I think that's an important step. Firstly, you begin to explain convoluted or complicated topics in an engaging way is very challenging, and most people can't do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, just being a bit fun, being a bit more personality, it does make you stand out in what is quite a, I mean, most SaaS like niches, they all look the same. Everything's quite, everyone's got the same color scheme or the same logo, things like that. And so having those things that make you actually stand out can go a long way.
Yep. We actually, so I don't know if you've ever used DNSimple, but if you go into the DNS editor inside DNSimple and you scroll down to the bottom of a zone, you'll see a little thing there that's a music player. And this was an April Fool's joke that we created, I think at least 10 years ago, maybe more. I don't remember. No, it was, about 10 years ago, probably, maybe 9. And it works. You can go in and you can play your zone as music, and it's got some little hidden Easter eggs in there. And I regularly get emails in our support that says, "Love you guys, please don't ever remove the music player." And I always say, "Don't worry, we love it. It's not going anywhere," because it's part of the fun of being able to do this and not needing to say, "Oh, we have to make investors happy," or we have to we want to do well, but the company's profitable. It's privately owned. There's no outside investment that ever came in, so we can do stuff because we just want to do it sometimes.
Yeah, I think it shows not taking yourself too seriously while doing a good job is perfectly fine. People get concerned that if you have fun, then people go, "Well, they're not good." No one thinks that. No one's going to think a music player makes your tool worse. It's just
I hope
fun.
not. I hope not. I mean, maybe somebody does out there. I've had people be grumpy about things I would have never expected. But that's okay. I mean, like, everybody's got their opinions. I respect that. This is my business, though, so sometimes I'm going to make choices to do things just because I want to do them. That's the way it is.
Yeah, and that's the point. You're the founder of the company. You can make those decisions, and, as long as you're not hurting anyone, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Okay, so finally I want to ask you is that what are your long-term plans now from where you are and where you've come in 15 years, both for you and for DN Simple? What does your future look like, or your ideal future look like?
Oh, if only I could tell the future. I'm not usually very good at planning out that far. Here's some of the things I can tell you that. So, for example, the things we're focusing on this year. One of them is we are growing our enterprise offerings, and part of that is because we see an opportunity for us to help engineers inside of larger organizations have access to a DNS and domain management tool that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Right? For a long time, they had to pick from a few really bad choices. And which those choices didn't often have the tooling, and still don't today have the tooling they want to integrate, for example, into their infrastructure as code through things like Terraform or Ansible, or they don't have the APIs needed in order to integrate it directly into their product. And if they do, they're often difficult to use or unreliable. And so these are all things that we continue to invest in and we continue to focus on. But in order to grow enterprise sales, you have to give some things that you don't have, you don't normally build into your product when you're small and you're dealing with sales to individuals and small companies. Things like compliance, right? So this year we're aiming to get our SOC 2 compliance, which seems like, wow, why do you have to do that? Well, because for a lot of enterprises, they have to do that. It's a mandate. So we have to support that. Other examples are building a sales pipeline that works for them. So in other words, making sure that we can facilitate what their procurement department needs. We can facilitate that and appreciate that there are different people who are going to be using the tool from the ones that are going to be buying the tool.
Yeah.
Right. And so all of that takes time to create. So right now, that's one of our big initiatives is to continuously improve that for every. We work in 8-week cycles. So every 8 weeks, we try to make sure there are things coming out to help make that better.
Nice.
And then the other part is we do acknowledge that generative AI it's having an impact on a lot of different businesses. And so we've put together a team inside to make sure that, one, we have a good policy of safe usage about what we can and can't do. We're looking to vet some vendors for certain, like, we don't want to just throw everything in and, oh goodness, something was trained on customer data or proprietary business information. No, that doesn't work. So we're experimenting, but also being very cautious as we approach it. And so we're going to continue down that path through the remainder of the year, and I'm sure beyond, figuring out if there's a place for generative AI at DN Simple, and if so, what does that look like? And then finally, we continue to focus on just making sure the business stays stable and reliable. And that's not just about technology. It's also about partnerships, making sure that the partnerships that you have are good and solid partnerships, but also that you remove single points of failure. So if you have a partner that is providing a service and they're the only partner, that's a risk. So we're looking at ways to improve that throughout the year as well. Beyond that, I want to keep doing good stuff for our customers. I want to keep getting better and better each year with our reliability, with our functionality. I want to be able to. I'd love it if more people know about us, because I think we even still today, 15 years in, there's a lot of folks that have never heard about us that would actually be genuinely thrilled to have a service like ours to manage their DNS. But there's a lot of companies out there that do it. So getting the word out there is still always a goal that we go after. And then my big dream is just to be able to connect. If what I'd really love is people could come to DN Simple and then say, I want to take this domain and I want to hook it up to this service and this service and this service. And they go click, 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 and it's done.
Yeah.
Like, that's my dream world. And we're still far off from that. But every year we try to inch our way closer to this and fight against the rest of the industry who just does not want to allow that to happen, because they want people to be sticky in them. And we want to be sticky because we're doing the integrations, not because we're not doing the integrations.
Yeah, not because it's hard to undo it, but because it's easy to do it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. That sounds like a very, very straightforward and sensible plan for the future, which, you're a tech founder. I think you should probably up your game and have some more lofty goals, climb Everest, or, sell for $1 billion, something like that,
That's just not me. I have a great life already. I'm very happy with the life that I have, and I like to keep living it to the best that I can today. And part of that is not becoming indebted to either huge plans or big money or whatever it might be, and instead staying focused on continuous building a better business that's good for customers. I mean, that's that makes me pretty happy. I'm pretty happy. Now, if someday somebody comes and gives me an offer I can't refuse, don't get me wrong. Like I won't say no.
You're only human.
Yeah, I'm only human, right? But it'd have to be a really good offer, and it'd have to take care of the team and the customers as well. I'm not just going to go just for the sake of the dollar bill, you know?
Nice. I absolutely love that. So finally, where can people find and follow you?
So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn for some reason these days. So I'm Anthony Eden on LinkedIn. You can find DN Simple on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to me at my email address, anthony.eden@dnsimple.com. But as I mentioned earlier, do not try to pitch me on what you're building and get me to buy into it. And if you do, you better have an unsubscribe link because I'm going to click it or go to spam. Social media, I'm on a variety of those. So pretty much if you look for Anthony Eden, DN Simple, you'll find me in a variety of places.
Nice. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a great chat, and have a fantastic week.
Thanks for having me on, John. Appreciate it.